March 6, 1952. Mokotów Prison, Warsaw. An SS general is led to the gallows. His name is Jürgen Stroop, and just a few years earlier, he was the man who annihilated the Warsaw Ghetto with unimaginable brutality. He was so proud of his monstrous work that he compiled a lavish, leather-bound report to commemorate it, a gift for his superiors meant to showcase his ruthless efficiency. He called it, "The Warsaw Ghetto is no more." He intended it to be a monument to his glory. But in a stunning twist of fate, this trophy, filled with his own words and photographs, became his confession. The very document he created to prove his loyalty to the Reich would become the evidence that sent him to his death. This is the story of how a man's vanity became his own undoing, and how the proudest moment of his life wrote his own death sentence. This is the fall of Jürgen Stroop. To understand the man who would become the Butcher of Warsaw, we have to look at the world that made him. Joseph Stroop was born in Detmold, Germany, on September 26, 1895, the son of a policeman. His upbringing was modest, in a lower middle-class Catholic family. He was an average student who left primary school to start training at a local land registry office. In many ways, his early life was completely unremarkable, just another common man in provincial Germany. When the Great War erupted, Stroop volunteered for the infantry, was wounded at the front, and awarded the Iron Cross, second class. He ended the war as a senior non-commissioned officer, having shown a taste for military life. He returned to his quiet civilian job, but the Germany he came back to was a nation in turmoil. Defeated, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, and torn apart by political and economic chaos, the Weimar Republic was a perfect breeding ground for extremist ideologies that promised to restore German pride. For a man like Stroop, who craved the structure and purpose of the military, the post-war world was unsettling. He was looking for a cause, and he found it in the Nazi Party. In July 1932, just before Hitler came to power, Joseph Stroop joined the Nazi Party, and a week later, the SS. The SS, with its immaculate black uniforms and its promise of creating a new elite of racially pure supermen, appealed to his ambition. This was his chance to be part of something grand, something that would wash away his mediocre past. He shed his old identity with an almost fanatical zeal. He was no longer Joseph, a common Catholic name he grew to despise as not Nordic enough. In 1941, in honor of his deceased infant son, and to declare his new self, he legally changed his name to Jürgen. This wasn't just a name change, it was a rebirth. Jürgen Stroop, the SS man, was a new creation forged in ideology. He fully embraced the Nazi worldview, its theories of racial hierarchy, and the necessity of Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people. His rise through the ranks of the SS was swift. The party rewarded loyalty and ruthlessness, and Stroop had plenty of both. He commanded SS units, took leadership courses at the Dachau concentration camp, and climbed from one promotion to the next. By 1939, he was an SS Standartenführer, equivalent to a full colonel, no longer a simple clerk from Detmold, but a senior officer in the most feared organization in the Third Reich. His early assignments gave him hands-on experience in the brutal mechanics of Nazi occupation. After the invasion of Poland in 1939, he was sent to Poznan, where he commanded the Selbstschutz, militias of ethnic Germans used to terrorize the local Polish population. There he oversaw arrests, expropriations and murders as part of the Reich's plan to Germanize the new territories. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Stroop volunteered for combat, serving with the notoriously brutal 3rd SS Totenkopf Division. Wounded again, he earned another medal, further polishing his military credentials. His experience on the Eastern Front, a war of annihilation against Judeo-Bolshevism, undoubtedly hardened him. He was later assigned to help secure key logistical routes, a role that involved brutal anti-partisan warfare, the Nazi euphemism for mass murdering civilians, partisans, and especially Jews. By 1943, Jürgen Stroop was the ideal SS officer. He was a decorated veteran, an experienced police commander, a hardened anti-partisan fighter, and an ideologically pure Nazi. He had proven his loyalty, his efficiency, and his complete lack of moral restraint. He was a man who saw brutality not as a necessary evil, but as a righteous tool. It was this combination of traits that brought him to the attention of the highest levels of the SS. And in April 1943, as a ghetto in Warsaw dared to defy the Third Reich, SS Chief Heinrich Himmler knew exactly who to call. Before it became a tomb, the Warsaw Ghetto was the largest Jewish ghetto in Nazi-occupied Europe. Established in October 1940, it was a city within a city, sealed off by a 10-foot wall topped with barbed wire. At its peak, over 450,000 Jews were crammed into an area of just 1.3 square miles. The conditions were deliberately lethal. Official food rations were set at starvation levels, with some estimates as low as 181 to 184 calories a day. Overcrowding was extreme, with an average of 7 or 8 people in a single room. Typhus and dysentery ran rampant, turning the ghetto into a landscape of unimaginable suffering. The German authorities claimed the ghetto was a quarantine to prevent disease from spreading. This was a lie. The ghetto was a holding pen, a slow-motion instrument of extermination designed to weaken its population before the final act. That final act began in the summer of 1942 with the Großaktion Warschau, the Great Action. Under the command of SS and police leader Ferdinand von Salmen-Frankenegg, German forces began the mass deportation of the ghetto's inhabitants. The operation was disguised as resettlement to the east, but the destination wasn't a labor camp. It was the gas chambers of Treblinka. Over 2 months, somewhere between 254,000 and 300,000 people were herded onto cattle cars and sent to their deaths. By the end of the Great Action, only about 60,000 to 70,000 people remained. The illusion of resettlement was shattered. Everyone now understood. Deportation meant death. In the wake of this catastrophe, something changed. Out of the grief and loss, a burning desire for revenge and a new, desperate resolve took hold. Underground movements, once fragmented, began to unite. They formed the Jewish Combat Organization, JOB, led by a charismatic 23-year-old named Mordechai Anielewicz. They were under no illusions of victory. They knew they couldn't defeat the German army. Their goal was different: to resist, to fight back, and to choose the time and manner of their own deaths, with a rifle in hand, not in a gas chamber. Their chance came in January 1943. Himmler, furious that so many Jews remained, ordered deportations to resume. But when German troops entered the ghetto on January 18th, they were met with organized, armed resistance. Caught completely by surprise, the Germans took casualties and after 4 days, abruptly retreated. For the Jewish fighters, it was a stunning, if temporary, victory. It proved that resistance was possible. Morale soared, and the remaining population began building hidden bunkers and secret passages, preparing for the final battle they knew was coming. For the SS, this was an unacceptable humiliation. The idea that subhumans could successfully fire on German soldiers was an affront to their entire ideology. Himmler was enraged. He decreed that the Warsaw Ghetto must be liquidated completely and razed to the ground. The man in charge, von Salmen-Frankenegg, was deemed incompetent. He would be given one last chance to carry out the final liquidation. On April 19, 1943, the eve of Passover, the final battle for the Warsaw Ghetto began. Before dawn, over 2,000 heavily armed German troops surrounded the ghetto walls. Their commander, Ferdinand von Salmen-Frankenegg, was confident, assuring his superiors the whole thing would be over in 3 days. At 6 a.m., his forces marched into the central ghetto. The streets were eerily empty. The people had gone underground into the network of bunkers. The Jewish fighters were waiting. As the German column advanced, a hail of bullets, grenades, and Molotov cocktails rained down from windows and rooftops. The Germans, expecting terrified civilians, were caught completely off guard. An armored car was set ablaze. Stunned and taking casualties, the German forces beat a humiliating retreat. Von Salmen-Frankenegg's plan had failed within hours. News of the debacle reached Himmler instantly. He was furious. That very morning, von Salman Frankenegg was fired. His replacement was already in Warsaw, sent there on Himmler's personal orders, SS Brigadeführer Jürgen Stroop. Stroop was the opposite of his predecessor. He was a specialist in brutal anti-partisan warfare, and he arrived with a clear mandate and no restraint. His mission wasn't just to clear the ghetto, it was to annihilate it, to turn it into a desert of rubble, and he was immensely proud of this mission. From his first day, Stroop began compiling a meticulous record of his operation. He dictated daily reports detailing every action, every casualty, every success. These communiques would form the core of a lavish, leather-bound album he would later assemble as a personal trophy. He titled it, "Es gibt keinen jüdischen Wohnbezirk in Warschau mehr." The Jewish quarter of Warsaw is no more. Stroop's strategy was simple and barbaric. Since the fighters wouldn't meet him in open battle, he would burn them out. He ordered his men to set the ghetto on fire, block by block. His daily reports, written in the cold, bureaucratic language of mass murder, chronicle this with chilling precision. He sent in pioneers with flamethrowers to smoke out the Jews and bandits. The ghetto became an inferno. The sky over Warsaw turned red, the air filled with black smoke and the smell of burning flesh. The Jewish fighters, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, fought with the courage of despair. They used sewers and attic passages to launch surprise attacks before melting back into the ruins. Stroop's forces responded with overwhelming force. They brought in artillery to pulverize buildings. They pumped smoke and poison gas into sewers to suffocate those hiding below. They used listening devices to locate bunkers, then dropped in explosives. Those driven out by flames and thirst were shot on sight or captured for deportation. One of the most famous and haunting photographs from the Stroop Report was taken during these operations. It shows a small, terrified boy with his hands raised in surrender as a German soldier points a submachine gun at him. He is surrounded by women and children, their faces etched with terror. This single image came to symbolize the millions murdered in the Holocaust. For Stroop, it was just one more picture for his triumphant album, a testament to his efficiency. The battle, which was supposed to last 3 days, raged for nearly a month. Stroop's daily reports became a grim ledger of destruction. Day after day, he tallied the number of Jews and bandits captured or destroyed. The resistance, however, refused to die. Mordechai Anielewicz and his command staff directed the fight from a large bunker at Miła 18. They held out for weeks against impossible odds. But on May 8th, the Germans surrounded the headquarters. Rather than surrender, Anielewicz and dozens of his commanders took their own lives, fulfilling their pledge to die fighting. With the command structure shattered, organized resistance began to crumble. Still, scattered groups fought on from the ruins. For Stroop, this wasn't enough. He needed a definitive, symbolic end to his operation. He found it in the Great Synagogue on Tłumacki Street. The magnificent building stood just outside the ghetto walls. It was empty and had been used by the Germans as a warehouse for stolen furniture, but its symbolic power was immense. Its destruction would be the final exclamation point on his monstrous work. On the evening of May 16, 1943, Jürgen Stroop watched as his engineers planted explosives around the synagogue. In his final report, he described the moment with theatrical relish. A fantastic spectacle of color was produced. With a fantastic explosion, the synagogue imploded. With this act, Stroop declared victory. He wrote the final summary for his report, a document that would eventually run to 75 pages. According to his own figures, his forces had captured or killed 56,065 people. He meticulously listed the handful of captured weapons and calculated his own casualties, a mere 17 dead and 93 wounded. He had 3 copies of his report made, one for himself, one for Heinrich Himmler, and one for his direct superior, Friedrich Wilhelm Krüger. Bound in black pebble leather and filled with 31 daily reports and 53 photographs, the Stroop Report was a monument to his own vanity. He thought he was presenting his Führer with a great victory. What he was actually doing was signing his own confession. With the ashes of the Warsaw Ghetto still warm, Jürgen Stroop was celebrated as a hero of the Reich. He was awarded the Iron Cross, First Class, and his reputation as a ruthless problem solver was cemented. In September 1943, he was appointed the higher SS and police leader for Greece, a post he held for a few months before being transferred. In Athens, he briefly oversaw security operations and the ongoing deportation of Greek Jews to Auschwitz. By November, he was reassigned to the Rhine-Westmark region in Germany. His duties there included organizing Werwolf partisan units, a last-ditch plan for guerrilla warfare against the invading Allies. He also oversaw the execution of captured Allied airmen, a direct violation of the Geneva Conventions. He would later be convicted for ordering the murder of 9 US prisoners of war. In the final, chaotic days of the war, Stroop tried to disappear. He fled south, wearing the uniform of a regular army captain with forged papers. The war was over. On May 8, 1945, the day of Germany's surrender, Captain Joseph Straub was captured by American forces. He held to his cover story for nearly 2 months, but the Allies were hunting for high-ranking Nazis, and the name Jürgen Stroop was on their lists. On July 2, 1945, faced with proof, he finally admitted who he was. The hunter had become the hunted. Jürgen Stroop's first day in court was not for his crimes in Warsaw. In 1947, a US military tribunal at Dachau tried him for ordering the murder of 9 American airmen. The evidence was clear, and on March 21, 1947, he was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. But his story wasn't over. The Polish government was determined to try the perpetrators of Nazi crimes on its own soil, and they requested Stroop's extradition. Shortly after his sentencing, the Americans handed him over, and he was flown back to Warsaw in chains. He was imprisoned in Mokotów prison, awaiting trial in the very city he had violated. In a bizarre twist, the Polish authorities put Stroop in a cell with another prisoner, Kazimierz Mocharski. Mocharski was a Polish patriot, a home army soldier who fought the Nazis. After the war, he'd been arrested by the new Stalinist regime on false charges. For 255 days, the Polish resistance fighter and the SS mass murderer shared a single cell. Thinking Mocharski was a fellow anti-communist, Stroop let his guard down. Eager to justify himself, he started talking. For 9 months, Mocharski conducted the most incredible interview of his life, which he later published as the book Conversations with an Executioner. He painted a chilling picture of an unrepentant man, proud of his achievements and filled with Nazi dogma. Stroop recalled every detail of the ghetto liquidation with precision, expressing a perverse admiration for the Jewish fighters' surprising effectiveness. He felt no guilt, only pride in a job well done. While this psychological portrait was being documented in a prison cell, the formal trial began on July 18, 1951. The prosecution laid out the charges: membership in the SS, leading the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto, the mass murder of over 56,000 people, and deporting hundreds of thousands more to the death camps. The prosecution had witnesses, but their star witness was Jürgen Stroop himself, or rather, his own work. The Stroop Report, created to win him glory, was presented to the court. The daily reports, the statistics, the shocking photographs, all laid bare. His own words, his own pictures, his own vanity had sealed his fate. The trial was swift. The evidence, much of it from the defendant's own hand, was overwhelming. On July 23, 1951, the court delivered its verdict. Jürgen Stroop and his co-defendant Franz Conrad were found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death by hanging. Stroop spent his final months on death row. There is no record that he ever expressed remorse. To the very end, he remained the man Mocharski knew, a convinced Nazi who saw himself as a loyal soldier being punished by victor's justice. The end came on March 6, 1952. Jürgen Stroop, the man who had declared the Warsaw Ghetto was no more, was taken from his cell at Mokotów prison. He was executed by hanging in the city he helped destroy at the hands of the people he had tried to erase. His body was sent to a medical facility, ensuring no grave would ever become a shrine. His predecessor, Ferdinand von Salmen-Frankenegg, was killed by partisans in 1944. His superior, Heinrich Himmler, committed suicide after being captured. But Stroop, driven by his own arrogance, left behind a legacy that they did not, a perfect, undeniable record of his own evil. The fall of Jürgen Stroop is a story of profound and tragic irony, a man driven by an insatiable hunger for glory who believed he was immortalizing his own heroism, instead meticulously documented his own infamy. He set out to write a tribute to the power of the Third Reich, but ended up authoring the evidence that would lead him to the gallows. He wanted to be remembered as a conqueror. Instead, history remembers him for what he was, the Butcher of Warsaw, a war criminal condemned by his own hand.